Hello, friends. I would like to talk to you about something very important: how to eliminate hidden losses and multiply silent profits in large scale retail stores using data driven intelligence. My name is Abraham Lale. I'm the CEO of Robinsberg Technologies. I'm also the CEO of Psychospace International. Now, let's get to it. Now, there are some peculiarities about large scale retail stores everywhere in the world, and I want to talk about a few of them before we go into the data analytics impact. All right, the first one is the fact that large scale retail stores have very thin gross margin, usually between 5% to 30%, and depending on the product category you are dealing with, many times, several times, a lot lower than that. All right, then you see, because they have very razor thin margin, a whole lot of things can easily go wrong, even though there's a lot of opportunities to make profit and to actually have cash flow in that industry. Another major peculiar issue with this kind of business is heavy and speedy activities. You can imagine that an average, large scale retail store can have between 1,000 to 10,000 transactions per day, depending on the number of locations they have within the particular uh, city or country. Now, that's humongous for the human mind, natural human mind, to effectively manage. But that's actually the reality. And while they are able to handle transactional information with their systems and the rest of it, a whole lot of data gets sunk into the system over years, which are extremely valuable, but which many times are never even be able to identify, talk less of being utilized. Then there is heavy inventory. In that environment, there is a whole lot of inventory that is available, making vulnerability for mismanagement, theft, and pilferage to be something that is a major concern if not well managed. High volume cash flow. Now, one of the major issue about this kind of business is the fact that you are always going to have a lot of cash flow because the activities are high, the demands often is actually in line with human, activities, and so there could be the deceit of profitability, even though what you have is actually cash flow. And with cash flow, there is vulnerability to financial fraud because a lot of the people working with you might assume that every cash they see translate automatically to profit, which really is not. So apart from the fact that you can be, lulled into deceit of thinking you are making profit because you have access to a lot of cash flow, or the fact that a lot of banks are willing to offer you cash, it can also cause problem if you really do not handle it well with the power of data-driven intelligence. And then there is this breadth, taking competition. And when I talk about breathtaking competition, I'm talking about the fact that because you have a whole lot of competition in this industry, there is a pressure for quick emotional decisions and imitation of policies many of the times, which is not the best for an environment with very thin margins. So, what's the solution to this? Data driven intelligence. Basically, we're talking about business intelligence, we're talking about effective data analytics, we're talking about predictive analytics, we're talking about machine learning solution. Now I'm going to actually explain this by taking you through a very practical example. For example, here we have a data that's available, from the public domain, in is a US superstore, and it's available on Kaggle, so it's actually a public data. But then the first thing I need to tell you about this data is the fact that you have close to about 10,000 records, gathered over a period of time. Now it's very, very humongous. It's not something that ordinarily you can cope with. We're just looking directly at the data. But then working with very simple data analytics can help you solve that problem. If you look at this, this is showing us profit margin by segment and product subcategory. The first thing I want you to understand is to look at the product subcategories here. We have labels, we have paper, and the rest of them. We have, you know, uh, things like tablets and other things like that. But one of the things I want to see very quickly is the fact that we have some major sub-segments here, and then you have the profitability of each of these products. So you can see that you have between 43% profitability when you are dealing with things like label, to about 4% profitability when you're dealing with things like chair. But then you begin to have, you know, some of these things in different locations falling into um, losses. And this is something that, occurs without anybody. That's why we call them silent, killers. There are things that if you are not careful, you will not even know when you are making losses because you are dealing with humongous amount of data. But one of the interesting thing about this kind of system or data analytics that can help you is the fact that, for example, apart from the fact that you can see that things like binders, minors, in terms of profitability, appliances, and the rest of them, you can actually come here and click on your interest subsegment. For example, if I want to look at home office, if I click on that, you will discover that the system will filter for me everything that relates to home office and tell me exactly the peculiar, losses or profits that I'm making. So you can see that it has grayed out some of these other segments, and it is showing me just the segment that I'm dealing with. So I can see that, I can see the specific losses and the specific profit for each of these different product category. If I go to, for example, consumer, you will realize that, some of the losses that we had before has even increased because we are dealing with a particular sub-segment. And that is actually the power of having a dynamic, precision oriented, you know, uh, business intelligence solution. For example, this particular solution is already linked with all the different sources of data. And as people begin to, you know, uh, as people begin to impute, data while they are doing their transactions, you, wherever you are in the office, wherever you are located, you can actually see on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, the implications of this with respect to the individual profitability of some of the activity that's going on. For example, this is by segment, but we can go ahead and look at another dimension. If you look at this same profitability of these items, looking at different regions. First of all, I want to see, going by regions, the profitability of the strongest region is in the West region. This is actually a data of an American whatever. So you're going to be seeing American locations. So we have West, East, South, but you see the most profitable among the region right now, based on the data analytics, with the data in the system, is West, which is about 21.9%. And then you can see how it goes into different. But then these things can also be translated and linked with the different items. So you can see that with these things that you have here, if I decide to say, look, the central region is showing the highest losses. So you can actually click on that and then see how bad things are. You can see that initially the loss that is general was even lower, but here it has increased to almost about 125% just by focusing on this particular location, focusing on that region. I mean, that is the power of having a very strong dynamic data analytics that can give you a lot of information. So I can actually revert back to normal, and then I can do the same thing for other sub region. If I come to profitable region, then it will even tell me specifically. You can see that in some other regions, something that was making losses here generally is actually making profit because this particular region is actually profitable. So how important is that to a manager or an investor? You begin to be able to have precision, information that's going to help your profitability and strategic decision instead of assuming. You can imagine by the time you look at how many locations this organization have in United States, then you begin to see the humongous challenge we are looking at. Let's go by state. If you come, you can see now this organization have locations in several states. So these are the list of the states you can see as I'm moving up and down. You can see these states, but you need to understand that this same data, if you can decide to slice it by any of these states, then you begin to see what's happening. Look at, if I decide to click on now, the most profitable state here is Iowa, all right, which is about 42% on the average, all right. But so if I click on this state, it will begin to show. You can see that it doesn't record loss in any of these sub items, and then many of these ones that have average profitability has quickly jumped up just by looking, just by focusing on that particular one. Now I can go back to and then select another state. For example, you can also see that there are major states that are having losses. So you need to understand that you can now micromanage with respect to precision information your business by having a tool like this, which can help you to see. So if I click on Arizona, for example, you can see that it shows me specifically which of my product items are having problems and what is the extent of profits and what is the, so you can see the loss here coming to as much as 66%, which in fact 165%, which initially was a lot lower because we are dealing with a very unprofitable state. So you can imagine you having several locations within your country or within your state and being able to, without leaving your office, because we will have plugged all the different data sources into a dynamic, you know, uh, business intelligence tools, well, a tool like this, which will be able to help you to have those kind of detailed information. We can do something similar by city. So you can look at the city, you can see the most profitable city, and you can select on each of the individual cities. But I did something else. Let us look at the relationship between shipping mode and the categories of shipping modes and profitability. Maybe you can take advantage. For example, you have four different major categories of shipping modes here, and then you may want to find out what is the shipping mode that gives you as a company the greatest profit, which one is associated with the greatest. So we have the second class, all right, followed by generally followed by the same day whatever shipping mode, and then the first class, which is giving you about 20%. All of them are profitable anyway. But the good thing about it is that by the time you begin to look at for specific items, for example, if I come here and click on tables, all right, it will tell me that in spite of whatever it is, all these things are associated with losses. So you don't even want to bother, all right. But then if you look at some locations, you can decide to say, okay, let me look at um, Minnesota, for example, and see, you can see that the profitability has increased and then it has changed. Initially, we're looking at second class shipping, but it has turned to same day. And then you can begin to use this as parameters, for taking advantage. Maybe you want to sell some of these things, maybe you want to focus depending on the location. So you can have location specific strategic management and you can have precision. There are several things that you can also have, when you have a detailed understanding of how to, create a very strong business analytics, and the machine learning solution for any organization you are dealing with. Now, you can imagine, on the other hand, if your competitor actually gets hold of something like this and you are in the same industry and you know that your margin is very thin, that's a major challenge. I believe that you may have one or two questions or you want to explore more. You can actually get to us with any of these contact information. Cheers for now. Bye.